everyone, I'm Eva, and I'm very excited to welcome you to our fourth Active Peers AI YouTube livestream today. We have developed and launched this series because we want to give you insight into how you can use Active Peers AI to host engaging and active peer learning sessions for your group so that your participants can get the chance to effectively share knowledge, build confidence, and discover their untapped potential. For those of you who aren't familiar with Active Peers AI, let me give you a quick explanation of what this company is all about. At Active Peers AI, we use artificial intelligence to enable our clients to facilitate a group of people who are engaging in an active and collaborative learning experience. We have built a unique AI matching algorithm that matches people based together on what they already know and what they want to learn. This ensures that everybody finds the best peer learning partner possible to make the most out of their collaborative learning. We also have a peer learning prompter that is used to guide peer discussions to ensure that everybody gets a chance to share, but also learn from one another in the most effective way possible. Today, I'm going to be interviewing our CEO and founder, Susan HayesCulleton, and 3 special guests who were part of the STEM TY Challenge. The STEM TY Challenge set out to change perceptions through a program that provided mentoring and skills training for students who participated. During the mentor training and skills bridge day, Susan used Active Peers AI technology lots of times. For instance, Susan used the Active Peers AI custom prompter to facilitate engaging conversations between the mentors and the students. Students also used the feedback tool to help the participants evaluate Active Peers AI's technology and help them lock in their learnings. We are going to hear all about how she made the magic happen. But before we invite Susan and our guests to join us, we have put together a short video that gives you insight into how Susan used Active Peers AI to help the mentors and mentees participating in the STEM TY Challenge deliver an amazing outcome. We will now play the video for you, and then we will invite Susan and our guests to join us soon after.
Well, hello Katie, and thank you very much for being part of our live stream today. As you know, the STEM TY Challenge was an environment where we wanted to bring together people from industry like your good self with another mentor, and then with the teenagers who formed part of the STEM TY Challenge. So before we get into that, will you just tell us a little bit about you and the work that you do, and then about your experience of being paired with another mentor and working with our teenagers?
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Susan, for having me. So my name is Katie O'Brien. I am currently one of the Gold Associates. It's the Johnson & Johnson Global Operations Leadership Development Program. So I'm in my first year of that, currently working with Janssen in the external quality space. And so my background was in biomedical science, so that was a joint course offered between University College Cork and Cork Institute of Technology. And I suppose to answer your question, my experience of being paired up with another mentor to work on this challenge is that I think I was very lucky in that when I was in university, in my third year of college, I got a mentor, and I had a mentor from industry. My mentor was actually from Janssen as well. So I think I have a bit of an experience, I suppose, on the mentee side of things, not so much on the mentor side of things. But I think what was really nice and maybe even unique about this challenge is that because there was a second mentor, we always had someone to kind of bounce ideas off and learn off of each other as we were trying to give, I suppose, as good advice we possibly could to our transition year girls. So we had four very lovely girls who we got to mentor, and they were just very enthusiastic, very excited to learn more about what we did and how we were doing it and how we got there. So I think it was a really fulfilling experience.
So it's interesting how you brought your experience as a mentee to the table in the first instance, and then, as you say, there was another mentor to bounce off, and that was very much part of the ethos of everything, is that everybody could learn from each other, including the mentors themselves. And Katie, we're big believers at Active Peers AI in highly effective questions, and the job that the custom prompter had was to give some ideas to the students about what they could do, and then inspire them to come up with their own. So what was the experience of the questions that they asked you? Because you did mention that they were very hungry to hear what you and your fellow mentor had to say, but how effective were the questions themselves?
Yeah, I think when you talk about effectiveness, it's really sometimes hard to define, what effective is. But I think some of the most effective questions they did ask were probably the most basic questions that you wouldn't even think to ask. So questions such as, what do you do every day? And that's such a simple question, but I had to think about it. I was like, well, I don't know, how do I explain to someone who's 15, 16 what it is that I do every day? And I think a part of that is because what we do is so natural to us at this point that we forget. When we were in TUI, when someone talks about a scientist, you think, oh, a scientist works in a lab and they never speak to anyone, and that's what they do all day. But I suppose the reality is a bit different to that. And another question they used to ask is, what happens if you make a mistake? And I think that kind of really brings me back to when I was in school and even in college. I was like, oh, when I get a job, what am I going to do? How am I supposed to know what is that I'm supposed to do and do it properly? And if I make a mistake, what impact does that have on people? And I think that just shows that even from TY, that's something we start to think about. We don't maybe think about the specifics of what a job is or what you're doing, but you're already thinking about, oh, what if I get it wrong? So I think even those questions just show from such an early age, they're curious about what a career in STEM is or what a career in general is, and then how, if you don't get it right all the time, what are the implications of that? And I think through our mentoring sessions, something that we always try to get across, myself and Kiva, the other mentor, is if you make a mistake, it's okay. Don't let the fear of making mistakes stop you from pursuing something that you're really interested in. There's always someone to learn off, or if someone got it wrong before you, it's okay if you get it wrong again. You will learn something from that, and that just shouldn't be a deterrent.
Katie, if there's one question that they love, it is what you do every day, because they like knowing, when you go in the morning, what do you actually do when you sit down, or when people are walking around a lab, or when they're walking around a site. So you're absolutely right about that one. The one about making a mistake, I think, is always interesting, because I think it's actually quite revealing. It shows your attitude to risk. It shows the company's culture to innovation, trying things, or else regulation and getting things right over and over again, for sure. But I think in particular, by answering it the way that you've described, by pointing out that there's always something to learn from it, it always reminds me of one of my favorite phrases, which is, if you win, you'll be successful, and if you lose, you'll be wise. So it's interesting that they were the questions that they were asking, and also they were and why they were asking them as well. And also throughout the experience, we were asking our teenagers all the time to document what they'd learned from you, the mentors. Now that partly fed into the TY challenge itself, which was to produce a video at the end. So we saw the output of that. But throughout as well, we asked them to write a LinkedIn post every Skills Bridge day, so that then it gave them a chance to really lock in what they were learning from you as they went along. And how do you make sure that you're learning what you're learning? How do you make sure that you're locking in the learnings from your own personal journey?
Yeah, so I think they do, at times you think you're not making any progress and you're doing the same thing every day, and you're like, oh, this is very, very basic. But I think because I have been lucky enough to have a mentor, I've always had the opportunity to check back in with them every now and again. We don't meet as often as we used to when the mentoring probably began, but I know I always have a point of contact to kind of refer back to if I ever feel like I'm stuck in a bit of a rut or I'm not making as much progress as I'd like to be able to make. I always have, I suppose, that point of contact that I can go back to and say, oh, look, I feel like I'm not really progressing. Do you have any advice there from your own experiences? Have you ever been through this and how did you overcome it? And, it's funny you mentioned LinkedIn. I'm a big fan of LinkedIn. I do love a good LinkedIn, but I think it can serve as a really nice tool for you to monitor how far you've come. So if you ever, make a LinkedIn post and you post it, that's it, you forget about it. It's kind of there as an archive. So again, if you ever feel like you're a bit stuck, you go back to your LinkedIn feed. You're like, oh, like I did that. That was great. And before that, I did another thing. And it kind of serves, I suppose, as a reminder to be like, oh, I don't feel like I'm achieving anything right now, maybe, but you can look back, maybe take some other inspiration from other things you did before and then apply that to something else. So I think I'm a big LinkedIn fan. It's my diary in a way, but a very public diary.
Very public indeed. That's a very good point. But also, actually, Katie, I never thought about it like that, in that it's a great way to chronicle your learning journey, not as you're chronicling it, but as you can go back and check in and maybe reflect on building your own confidence as well along the way, and just saying, oh yes, well, I did do that and I overcame that, or I achieved that. Also, having your own respective mentor that you can go to if you're feeling stuck in a rut, etc., is really important. I think it's a very important thing. I have mentors that I go to all the time, and I think you can become a very good mentee if you have a very clear articulation of how you might be feeling stuck. So Katie, thanks very much indeed for being here with us. And also, of course, for being part of the STEM 2Y Challenge. The teenagers really did enjoy working with you and with your fellow mentor, Kiva. So thanks very much indeed for being here today, and we wish you all the very best for the future.
Thank you, Susan.
And now I'm going to invite Emily to join us. So Emily Upton was also another mentor on the STEM 2Y Challenge. So first of all, Emily, you're very welcome, and thank you for being here with us today. So first of all, can I ask you the same as what I asked Katie? And that is, can you tell us a little bit about you and what you do in your job, please?
Yeah, so hi, I'm Emily Upton, and I am a process development chemist in Thermo Fisher Scientific in Cork. So it is a lab-based role, and we're working on a wide variety of new projects to bring on plant. So I suppose my background is I did my undergraduate in chemistry in the University of Limerick, and at the moment I'm studying part-time in UCC for a master's in pharmaceutical engineering.
Right, okay, and I didn't actually realise, Emily, that you had an undergrad in chemistry. It's rare enough we get to talk to people like you in an environment like this, so I'm intrigued to just hear a little bit more about that and how the teenagers reacted to it. But first, before I get there, one of the key things that we felt was really important was to check in with our mentors right throughout the process, because from the very beginning of the STEM 2Y Challenge, we wanted to be interactive and iterative, yes, but we also wanted to make sure there was a consistent experience for people who were taking part in it. And that was why we checked in with you regularly. How did it feel for you to have those regular check-ins, for us to be sending you our feedback loop survey, etc., and of course reflecting back to you what we were hearing throughout?
Yeah, I suppose the feedback surveys were great, and what I really liked about them was that they were sent very soon after you had your session with the students. So I suppose it was fresh in your mind, anything you wanted to relay back. But I suppose what I found great about them really was that you were able to see what other groups were doing as well and what they were planning. So you were able to take some feedback from that and bring it back to your own group.
I think that feedback is really important, to see what other people are doing, because I think in school often, Emily, we're encouraged to not look at what other people are doing and only focus on your own. And of course, there's a reason for that. You'll be studying an exam afterwards. But however, in the workplace, it's actually really important to learn from what other people are doing. And if I could maybe just go back to that undergraduate in chemistry and other things that you brought to the table. Like I mentioned there a moment ago, we wanted this to be consistent, but flexible enough where people could play to their strengths. So could you tell us a little bit about your strengths and what you brought, and maybe the strengths that you saw in the other people around you, whether it was your fellow mentor, the teenagers, the environment, etc.?
Yeah, so I suppose what I thought was great was that within my mentor group, I had two others, and Edith actually had an undergrad in chemistry as well, but she's actually a QC analyst, which would be a very different job to what I do in a process development role. So I felt that kind of showed the students that just because you're going into a certain type of undergrad or whatever you're doing, an apprenticeship or whatever it may be, you're not stuck to the one route, the one job. There's lots of different ways to go once you finish your education. Also on top of that, Quiva, who was the other mentor, she has an undergraduate in engineering and is actually doing a grad program in Dupuy. So that was another route that showed students, and she could give her perspective from an engineering background, whereas I suppose myself and Edith are, predominantly in the lab most of the time.
Okay, so by the way, on that note, Emily, you spoke about if you do study one thing, you're not then stuck to something else. 4 out of 10 of our teenagers tell us their biggest career worry is what if I don't like what I do and then I'm stuck. So the fact that they could see that in action very much around you, I think is a really important part. And can I also ask, how does somebody with a background in chemistry think? Is it logically? Is it like A plus B equals a reaction which can lead to C? How is the thought process worked through with you?
I suppose it's kind of when you go to college. I think something I found from it was that, okay, you're learning notes, you're learning reactions and things like that as well. But it's not only that, you're learning, how to think, how to approach things. And you're not always going to be following by a method that you've been given exactly how to do something, but you will take what you learned from performing something that way, combining your different experiments, your different experiences to deal with new ones. So I suppose it is quite logical in that sense.
And on that note, around thinking logically, what would you suggest to future STEM TY Challenge mentors? What advice do you give to them?
Yeah, so I suppose if anyone is approached to do it, I definitely recommend it. I found it very enjoyable. So that was mostly due to the students. They really made the experience. They're very enthusiastic, lots of questions. The group we had as well had a good mix. So it was 2 boys and 2 girls, and luckily enough, they were interested in all different areas of STEM. So you'd one interested in maths, in engineering, another interested in chemistry, and then one of the girls was actually interested in an apprenticeship as well. So it was really good to see, their thought process, what they thought was ahead of them, and I suppose give them a little bit of a steer and help them to decide what ways they can go and give them an insight into it.
Well, inspirational words indeed, Emily. Well, thank you very much indeed for being part not just of the challenge, but also of our session today. And likewise, again, we wish you all the very, very best in every way.
Thank you.
Thank you indeed. And so our next guest is indeed Marguerite. Now, I see there, Marguerite, your name is not what is underneath your screen there at all. So I am now going to fix that right away.
That's okay, Susan. Lovely to be here. Thanks, Susan.
And thank you very much for being here with us indeed. So first of all, Marguerite, you were one of the people at the earliest stages of the STEM TY Challenge that came up with the idea of what it would be. Can you first of all take us through the journey of what that has looked like right up to it coming into reality?
Yeah, I suppose the reason I'm very interested in trying to bridge the gap of getting to explain what STEM and STEM roles are in industry. And so a group of industry partners, you've heard from Thermo Fisher there and J&J and a number down in Cork area, got together and we started brainstorming. How do we have a way of sharing with students what we do inside the gates of industry? And one of the things we thought would be that if we could get peer-to-peer learning and to enable that. And I'm always a fan of mentors and being able to let mentors or role models really steer the way and really help students, understand what the careers are and what they do every day. Like, what do you do every day? You spoke about it. It's a question they ask, and we want to be able to share those experiences and break down some of the misconceptions that are there. And so working with yourself, we were able to brainstorm and then frame, I suppose, an overall TY challenge experience, where the experience is really bedded in building skills. And what we wanted the students to do was, as part of learning about STEM and finding out about the careers in STEM, that they'd also use that time to build some skills themselves in terms of their teamwork and communication and getting used to technology. And we wanted to be able to have this as an output. So we wanted to have something at the end that we could say is the output. We kind of decided, maybe a video would be something that could live on, and we'd also be able to share that, to a broader audience. So, it evolved, and I suppose, the key thing for me was that it would be a learning experience. Bringing the mentors on board, that became part of, I suppose we decided to do that because role models and hearing from people at work is such a critical part of it. And as you heard from the two mentors, just in Emily and in Katie, they learned so much from it.
And picking up on what they particularly got from it, Marguerite, what 3 takeaways did you take from what they just said as what was shared with us now?
Oh, yeah, no, it's really interesting listening to them. And I think one of the things is hearing from them of how much they learned and the experience as a mentor, and the skills that they built as a mentor. And I think the whole budding mentors together was really, it was a really nice way to frame it, because they shared learning. That was definitely one thing that stood out for me, is that's such a critical part. And learning came in so many different dimensions. And the second thing I'd point to was around, the value of questions, and the value of being, I think it was Katie said, it was a basic question and I didn't think of asking it. And that was the question that actually, released a lot of information and got us to share so much. And I think, effective questions, it was lovely to hear her speak to that, because I think that that's something that we don't actually maybe value as much, and being able to have that as and have a prompter to help us do that in a consistent way, but also to really help you connect with maybe where you think someone has a years difference of experience from you and is coming from a different place. How do I make that connection? And being able to connect with the students was so important for us. And I loved as well the feedback loop, because feedback sometimes is seen as really negative, whereas I think it was Emily spoke about it in terms of it actually is a positive experience. Like, that's what I pick up from what they, the experience of using the feedback loop, is that you learn from what the other groups did, and you're looking into, you're just broadening, what you're sharing. And it's very positive, it is a way of saying that feedback is going to, really help everybody. It helps the process of what we're doing here, but it helps the individuals in terms of like seeing something in another dimension.
Well, I love your phrase, learning happened in so many dimensions, because I think A, that happened, but B, it's a lovely way of looking at it, is that anybody who came to the table also brought something away from it as well. You mentioned there as well about the idea from the beginning of coming together, promoting STEM, using peer-to-peer learning, but having an output at the end. So every student has an output that they contributed to. Every mentor can see an output that they produced. So how, standing here now, as we're live today on the 12th of December 2022, how, looking back, has the pilot worked out from what you had initially hoped and dreamed of?
Oh, like speaking at the beginning there, where I spoke about what I hoped it would do, and it was to share what STEM was. It was to help with some of the misconceptions around STEM and STEM roles and what goes on in industry. It was also to be able to have that output. Now, I didn't have the vision that the output could be so powerful as it was, and that was like, from what I hoped it would be to what the actual output was, we had the videos shown, showcase, and we had parents there, teachers, we had the other students looking at each other's videos. And there was an amazing reaction to the content and to the learning that came through in the videos. And now those videos will be available for us to share to a broader audience. So that has absolutely been amazing. But I think what has really, been another unintended consequence was the feedback from the mentors and how much they learned and how many tools they kind of and skills that they built during the process. So I think that from the impact perspective, what I hoped it would have to what it actually is having, and it's in an ongoing way, has been amazing. And it really has been down to the way that skills days were built, the tools, the experiences that the students had, and the actual, us hearing from those experiences nearly live, because we were able to see it on LinkedIn, see the what topic they were learning that day, and how that was I suppose changing how they had views on STEM, or what they thought were, those unintended things that are there in terms of they didn't expect, and in their surprise in what was being done in different roles, and that it's not white coats and labs, and that it's that it's not an isolated role. When you work in STEM, you're working as a team, and it's very dynamic, and it's way more exciting than sometimes it is perceived.
And when you think about the ingredients that made all that happen, the tools, as you say, the people themselves, the feedback loop between the mentors, the interaction between the mentors and the students, the LinkedIn, there's a model there, Marguerite. There's a model which brings together students, mentors, industry collaboration through the lens of technology and scale, but highly focused on skills-based learning. What would be your comment on the overall model, ultimately, that the STEM TY Challenge has created?
I absolutely think it has helped. One thing that I've always been afraid that is limiting is that we just try to transfer knowledge, and we try to transfer, information, as opposed to helping the learner learn. And I think the way we've approached it here has really helped, having a whole different learning experience where it's very practical. That skills based is so important, and it's so important for students to see that the soft skills you need in technical roles is as important as it is in other jobs that you may hear of, and I think that the whole formula has the ingredients there that really maximizes the learning, and I'll go back to that whole it's not a 360 dimension of learning goes on. Everybody, I learned so much from it. I learned from the mentors, I learned from the students, I learned, from, even my own experience of just sharing and looking at the videos. So I think that you need a village sometimes, and you need technology, and you need, people to release what they have for the greater good. And I think the way the environment was set up and the learning ecosystem was set up maximized the learning, and gave us the best outcome that I could have dreamt of when we started this back in, I think it was January last year. It has really been overwhelming, the response that we got to it, but as well as it's now a formula for us in ways of which we can make sure you need all those branches of the tree so that we can actually make sure that the seed of learning is there flourishing. So it's so important that I think all of those dimensions come into play to maximize the learning.
Brilliant. Well, Marguerite, thanks so much indeed for giving us at Active Peers AI the opportunity to be part of it, but also for your very reflective and reflective observations as well today. And I'm sure everybody who's watching can also see as well just how much passion and enthusiasm you bring to the table. So we really look forward to making this bigger and better all the time. And thank you again for being with us today.
Thanks, Susan. Thanks for making it happen.
Thank you indeed. And so now, Eva, let's have a reflection on all of what we've heard today. This has been, as you mentioned at the beginning, our fourth live stream. We've never had 3 guests on all at the same time to give a different perspective. So what was your thoughts on what you've just heard?
I think it was very interesting how the mentors have such different thoughts and they come from different backgrounds. I especially liked how I think it was Katie who said that LinkedIn is sort of like a public diary where you showcase all of your works. And I think that's an amazing way to think of it. And I think it's important that we cultivate this thought into the students as well so that they can fully utilize LinkedIn and then work on it as well. Yeah.
I for sure, and Eva, often when they work on LinkedIn with us as teenagers in particular, because as we've reflected back on the various different live streams, our audiences can be made up of a variety of peers. But when it comes to teenagers, I think introducing them to LinkedIn, showing them how to use it properly, and then also seeing how it can help them all the way through their careers can be very helpful. And indeed, yeah, the public diary is a very good way. I'm going to be borrowing that. I'm going to be borrowing that one indeed.
Yeah, for sure. So now it's time to move on to our Q&A session finally. And before we begin, I just want to thank our audience for all the questions that they have submitted in advance. And if you still haven't submitted your questions yet, you still have a chance to do so by typing them in the live chat. So Susan, the first question that we got was, what has been your experience of being a mentor and a mentee, and how do they differ from each other?
Okay, so as a mentee, I think I'll always be one for a start. And I think that what's really important is to be very clear about what you want to get out of this. And that's what I was saying to Katie when we were talking about the effective questions from the prompter. What is it that you actually want from it? And you can be a very effective mentee if you go in with a very clear understanding of what you want out of it. The second thing though, Eva, is something that a lot of people don't talk about. And that is what happens when you don't follow through, because inevitably there's going to be something that happens. Maybe you don't get around to doing what you said you're going to do, or you're finding it difficult or whatever. And sometimes you don't actually do what you agreed to do during the mentoring meeting. Of course, what you feel you want to do then is to reschedule, if not cancel the whole thing, because you don't want to face up to the fact that you haven't done so. And as a mentee, again, that's happened to me. And I think it's very important to instead discuss why something hasn't been done with your mentor. There's a rich learning opportunity in that as well. And the third thing about it is, again, very few people mention this, even though it was implicit in the relationship that we had built through the STEM TY challenge, is it needs to have an expiry date. There needs to be an understanding that it will come to an end. The reason for that is, if people are giving up their time freely, and even if they're not, but if people are giving up their time freely, a time can come when there tends to be a sense of lack of balance between what they're getting and what they're giving. We never let that happen. With the STEM TY challenge, it was clear there was 3 skills bridge days, there was 3 mentoring meetings thereafter, and any other communication was up to the mentor and the mentee to manage. But there was an end point. And as Marguerite said on Friday the 11th of November, we had that showcase where the outcomes were showcased. But if you're in a business mentoring relationship, or you're in a corporate mentoring relationship, or whatever it might be, I think it's important for both parties to know there needs to be an endpoint for 2 reasons. One is the giver knows there is a discrete period of time when an output can, be expected. But at some stage, the mentee runs out of road as well. And I have been in that situation where I've thought, okay, I've gotten as much as I can from this relationship, not from a manipulative or anything like that, but the purpose of that relationship may have been served. So I think that that's also important from a mentee's point of view, is that there's an understanding and a communicated understanding that it will come to an end. Now, the mentor, on the other hand, I would say is, first of all, it's again important to know what the mentee wants out of this. And linked to that, very closely linked to that, Eva, is that I believe as a mentor's job is that your task is to help bring the person along, not just impart your wisdom down on top of them. And that bit is key. And again, Marguerite pointed out the difference there between learning and information transfer, is that a mentor's job is not to share the pearls of their wisdom ad infinitum. And then the third thing, again, I suppose it's a flip of what I just said there a moment ago, is that the challenges, the the times at which it can be difficult to maybe follow through on what you're being held accountable to, etc., is they offer learning opportunities. And it's a mentor's job, in my opinion, to help bring those people along. And, you know, when Emily was talking about working with the different mentors and that the fact that they had come from different backgrounds, the fact that there was a logical thought process, there was great diversity in that group. So maybe if somebody is maybe more creative than logical, they may not necessarily have logically followed a process, for example. So it's just, I think it's important as a mentor is that when things aren't done, it's not like you're holding them accountable to get things done. It's not about productivity. It's about outcomes. And understanding what isn't happening and why, and helping the mentee talk through that can be a really rich mentoring opportunity too.
That's some great advice, Susan. I definitely agree with your tips about the mentees. I think it's very important to have a clear idea of what you want to gain out of the experience. Otherwise, you might feel confused, as there are so many different aspects that you can work on. But I think it's important to have like a clear vision. And I think it's also very important to discuss it with your mentor when you can't follow up on the task, and know that it will come to a point at the end. And now someone else asked, what are the key principles of a successful mentoring relationship in your opinion?
It sounds a little bit of a vague answer, Eva, but I would start off by saying it's important that the parameters are clear on both sides. So what I mean by that is, what do we both want out of this? Okay, I've already spoken about that, but also, without getting too, corporate about this, is like, what values do we want to put into this relationship? For example, is punctuality important? Is regular check-ins important? Is probably a very important one, confidentiality and a lack of judgment important? Is being upfront about your thoughts or your concerns important? Is it, do we want to absolutely not let anything else that's going on in maybe the mentee's life into this conversation? Because maybe, for example, somebody isn't able to follow up on something because they have a sick child at home, or there is a pressing deadline in work, or so is this mentoring relationship allowing the space to look into that as well, or absolutely not? Is it that this is only to deal with the issue at hand? And I think it's worthwhile having a conversation about that before you start, because I might, as your mentor, I might value high pace, delivering an awful lot, bringing you through a steep learning curve, whereas you might actually appreciate the space to reflect, the ability to bring outside issues into the equation because maybe they're interlinked. Maybe you value punctuality, and rather than cancelling something because you've got a big deadline in work, you'd rather have the meeting and talk about that for a little while. Whereas I, on the other hand, can't see why I didn't reschedule the meeting when instead we could have talked about it next week and had a much better outcome. So that is where two of us can come from two very good perspectives, two very positive perspectives, but maybe they don't align. So that is one of the first things that I would say. And then the second thing, I think again it goes back to knowing what you want out of the relationship, but also knowing what you want out of each meeting. And Eva, look, we talk about this on every live stream, but I go into every meeting that I have, having taken a bit of time beforehand. I have my thinking breakfast where I do this every day, but before I go into any meeting, particularly a mentoring meeting, I will think about what is it that I'm looking for from that specific meeting itself. So I would say another to boil that down, another characteristic of a successful mentoring relationship is preparation in advance. And then the third thing is, was shown abundantly in the STEM TY challenge, but I think it's important as well, is I think it's really important to tell your mentor what you're learning from them as you go. So I've one in particular that I meet round about once every 6 weeks. And at the start of every meeting, because I've thought about it beforehand, I think about what I learned from the last one, put it into practice, and what I learned from that respective, putting it into practice. And the reason I say that is it does two things. It does, as we heard Emily say, like it's like a verbal LinkedIn. Okay, it does actually help chronicle the relationship. But the other thing is that I think it's important too to convey to the mentor the impact they're having. That's a word that Marguerite said. She said about impact and how the STEM TY challenge was really powerful. A mentoring relationship can be very powerful, but only if, I think, and perhaps it maybe relies more on the mentee to reflect back what they're learning, and then also respectively for the mentor to give feedback on the meta journey that's happening along, as maybe changes in their body language as they're speaking, or a change of tone in their confidence. There can be great care shown for both parties when one is willing to reflect to the other what they're getting out of it.
Yeah, definitely. I do think that you should set fixed parameters, especially when it comes to personal matters, because it could be a touchy subject and you don't want to intrude into someone's personal life. And I think definitely being prepared in advance. And I think it will be quite useful to have like a list of objectives or even a checklist of things that you want to achieve from that meeting. And I definitely do agree with you also that telling your mentor what you're learning along the way is also important, because it not only allows you to show your appreciation for the mentor, but also lets them know if they are doing enough to give you support along the way and what more they could be doing. And now for our last question, someone asked, do you have any tips for implementing a mentoring scheme at the workplace?
I have many, as always. Okay, my first one is, and this, you mentioned it's a touchy subject, so let's stick with that. Personally, I feel a mentoring relationship should be opt-in on both parties. I think putting somebody into a situation where they have to be mentored doesn't necessarily set them up for success. Now, I can be wrong. I could be wrong on that. You could have a very cynical party who ends up enjoying it an awful lot because they really throw themselves into it. You could have a very effective mentor who helps guide them through it. So of course, Eva, I could be wrong. But what I am saying is that I think having a starting point of where people opt in to an overall working environment is important. The second thing that I would say to anybody who's considering creating a mentoring initiative within the workplace is one of the unspoken but very influential thought processes that somebody can go through when it goes through this is, let's say, Eva, you're going to mentor me, but you're also responsible for determining whether I'm going to get a promotion, or you're determining what my bonus is going to be, or some other matter. Well then, am I really going to come to you and tell you about maybe an issue I'm having with a fellow colleague or a boss, and whereby that might actually influence the decisions you're going to be taking on my future? So I would certainly encourage people to think about, when mentoring is going to happen, is there an indirect influence here that could be having a disproportionately high impact on the quality of the conversation. And the third thing is, now this is coming from a technical point of view, but as somebody that is looking and has worked with mentoring programs when they've been, at scale, is that I think it's important to understand where blockages can happen. And let me give you some examples. Let's say, again, that I'm matched with you, right? And you're going to mentor me. But this has to be signed off on by a line of service manager. Let's say the line of service manager isn't signing off on these until a Friday afternoon, and we agree on Monday morning. I'm off next Friday. You're off the Friday afterwards. Then it's Christmas. Then we kind of start sometime around the middle of January, even though you and I had agreed in November. I think it's really important to spot where the blockages in the system might be. And there's ways and means of doing that. And it's probably not the time and place to get into it now, but there are ways and means of doing it. And that's why, Eva, going back to what I spoke to Emily about, that's why we had the feedback loop from the mentors, is we asked the mentors to share with us their feedback reports on the meeting. We weren't inspecting what was being discussed at the meeting. That was up to them. But what we did want to see is if they were happening, if the outreach was happening, if the responsiveness was happening. So we had our own technical methodology for understanding if that might be the case. So spotting where this can happen. And the third thing is again, I suppose I'm coming back to something I mentioned earlier, is understanding that there needs to be a finite period of time for this, or a finite outcome. Perhaps it is that you're mentoring me until I'm ready to apply for a promotion. And when I get there, whether it's apply for it or get it, it's important that we would determine which would lead to the outcome being achieved, is that then at that stage, we thank each other for our time and then we move forward. Because, Eva, what if you are mentoring me? You're mentoring me to get up to the level of promotion where you're at. And now I'm looking at the next level. And maybe you don't want to go to that next level. Is that now the conversation might become, again, unbalanced, awkward perhaps. And maybe where I'm thinking, okay, I now need to speak to somebody who is at a different stage in their career, etc. Is that if that's kind of set out from the beginning, it can make sure that the integrity of the relationship and the personal relationship between the two parties then is intact. So they're the three things that I would say, and I think they can be very powerful and prevent a lot of problems and really position a mentoring program for success.
Those are some great tips, Susan. I was really surprised when you talked about the indirect influence that the mentor could have on the mentee. This is something that I never thought about. So would you say that then it is not beneficial to have a mentor who is in a relatively higher position than you, just because of how it can impact your career?
The word there, Eva, to pick out is relatively. That's the one that you mentioned. I think I'm certainly not saying that it shouldn't happen. What I am saying is it can be unspoken. And I have often been in conversations with people where they say, well, she's my mentor, but she's also my boss. And therefore, how can I talk to her about maybe an issue that I'm having with her in a mentoring environment? And that can really, obviously, that can be unspoken, and it can be an issue. Now, sometimes, like when you're dealing with very large corporations, you can have people who are more senior and people who are more junior and might never interact ordinarily. That's a different scenario entirely. All I'm saying is that it's worthwhile considering this and considering what's not being said so that you can position the relationship for success.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Susan. So unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for the Q&A session today. So we're going to end it right here. It was so lovely to have you with us here, Susan, and all of our other guests. And I'm sure that our audience has found the Q&A session as helpful as I have. And thank you to all of our audience for taking out the time to join us in our YouTube Live and for all of your amazing questions. Active Peers AI is looking forward to seeing you all again in your future live streams. Take care and goodbye, everyone.